Дорогие друзья, я пока на русском представлю, чтобы уже точно было всем понятно. Мы в этот раз попытались привести человека из США, который наиболее подходит по навыкам, который, так скажем, лучший из тех, которые за последние годы уже прошли процесс, который мы в России только начинаем создавать. Мы пока что только в самом начале пути создания инкубаторов, технопарков, особенно в такой индустрии, как медицина, которая имеет очень много особенностей и достаточно сложная с научной точки зрения. Представляю вам Хансон Гиффорд, это директор The Foundry, одного из самых известных инкубаторов в Поло-Альто. А это его коллеги. Юля, я дам вам представиться самим.
Я могу представиться и на русском, и на американском, и на английском, но я думаю, что я, наверное, это сделаю на английском из уважения к коллегам, чтобы они чувствовали себя как-то более так, как дома, по-домашнему, да. So my name is Julia Damien, and I'm a medical doctor, so I do represent a clinician. I'm actually proud to be here 15 years later because I graduated this Moscow Medical Academy myself about 15 years ago, and I, currently I do live and practice in New York City. I run a medical practice, faculty primary care practice at Lenox Hill Hospital, and I also teach at New York University School of Medicine. Yeah, John, I think introduce yourself.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Джон Моррис. Я плохо говорю по-русски, лучше по-английски, извините. My name is John Morris. I work with Hannson Gifford at the Foundry with research and development for new medical devices.
Thank you. Really a pleasure and honor to be here to speak with all of you. Anna has said a little bit about how selectively you have been picked to work on development of new technologies. And so I'm excited that effort is getting started here in Moscow. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what we do to develop medical devices at the Foundry, and some of this is more specific to our incubator Foundry, but if you have any questions about anything along the way, please feel free to interrupt and ask questions. We want this to be more of a discussion than a lecture. Apologize that obviously I don't speak any Russian. All of you have perfect English. So, a little bit about myself. My father was a neurosurgeon. He told me that I should be a doctor since I was little. Family business. But I always liked to make things. So I took all of the pre-medical studies, but decided to focus on making devices instead. So worked at a range of companies, first in research and development, then after many years as an engineer designing products, migrated clinical role, going out to help teach doctors how to use the devices, back, marketing, and starting to lead new companies. First work was mostly in the area of catheters, open up blocked arteries. Then went to Germany actually, started a new company there, developing other catheters. Wanted to have the experience of living and working outside of the United States to see how things could be better and different in other countries. Came back and spent 5 years leading development efforts at a company called HeartPort, developing less invasive heart surgery tools, valve repair, bypass, and others. And then in 1998, formed the Foundry, partner Alan Will. And our mission at the Foundry was to start better companies from the start. Incubator, if you will, but talk to you about how we tried to do things a little differently. Up until then, our experience was typically a doctor had a good idea. The doctor talked to his cousin who was an engineer. They knew someone who was across the street who was an attorney who helped the company. Before you know it, a company is going, but it really doesn't have necessarily perfect ideas, perfect structure, the perfect people. And we thought if we could take those ideas and form the companies with people who had a great deal of experience in all those activities before, then maybe we could make better companies and have a better chance of success. So that was our theory, that we needed to create really great companies, to pick only the very, very best ideas, and then put those together with great leaders to build those companies. Over the past 14 years, at least in America, it has only gotten tougher and tougher to create companies that can succeed clinically and commercially. So when we started the Foundry, we raised $4 million from angels, set up a little facility with offices, cubicles, a research and development lab where we could make catheters and other devices, machine shops so we could make parts more quickly, and hired a team of people who I've known over the years who had a lot of experience going through that process. And we went out and started looking for great ideas and started inventing new ideas in areas that we thought were interesting, looking to pick just a few. And so that sounds a lot like most incubators, but there were some differences to our model. First of all, we decided to focus only on some really big ideas. And that means areas where there's a large value and a large number of patients, so that there really was the potential to build more than $1 billion business in those spaces. It's been my experience that whether you are working on a product that is going to treat 10 people or a product that is going to treat 10 million, the challenges are roughly the same, so you might as well work on things. Also, venture capital in America is structured in a way that they need to have some big hits in order to pay for the companies that don't succeed. Because to have a big hit, you need $50 million in investment, and a little company won't do that. And then finally, as I mentioned, we don't just look at ideas that come from outside, we really invent those companies and ideas ourselves about half the time. And when ideas come from outside, we also have improvements. When we have ideas, we also look outside for people who are thinking about the same areas and try to put together the very best ideas, try to refine our ideas so that they're as good as possible. We structured this to really create true teamwork with ourselves, with the company employees that are staying at the company over the long term, and with our investors and board of directors. We really become the company. Myself, partners will become the CEO of the company, and those companies really are run by us for the first 2 years or so until they have made significant progress, so that we're able at that point to bring in a great CEO, typically someone who already has a lot of experience with medical device development. That partnership needs to extend to the investors and the board of directors, because if they start to disagree, then it can really cause huge problems for the company. We are all aligned financially. To a great extent, the incentives drive the behavior. Many incubators have some space, it's a real estate project, and the goal is to fill it with aspiring companies. And so the rewards are based on having lots of people there. For us, the rewards are focused on creating successful companies. We get a small salary, but then we get some stock in the companies. And only when those companies succeed and are sold or become public companies or become profitable do we get a return. So we're in it for the long term as early investors, and I think that is very helpful. These projects take a long time, and so we need to have a partnership that's really strong to see it through the hard times. This can't be just a job. This really does take extra effort, late nights, early mornings. I'm sure as the most successful medical students, you are already very familiar with extremely hard work. And more than that, the company employees need to have a real vision for what they're going to do to help patients, to change the course of medicine. And they need to be very confident about it. And that confidence can't be in the form of an arrogance. It needs to be in the form of confident enough to listen to people, to be challenged, and to think and accept advice, and to be willing to evolve your thinking in whatever way is necessary to make the best success. These companies all end up in a different place than they started. And the learning process within the group is very important. One of the concepts that I think is very useful here is that there's a concept called effectual entrepreneurship, which says that rather than looking at what's happening and trying to figure out what's happening and say, here's the direction people are going, let's go run around to the front of that group and see where they're going, you have a vision, an idea, and say, this is an idea that doesn't exist, and no one's thinking about it, and maybe people are heading in that direction, maybe not, but I can see a vision of what this company can become, what this therapy can become, and really go out and be religious, evangelize towards the success of that project. It really is a wonderful thing that in our industry, one of the major end goals here is to help patients. Even if our companies are going to be financial success, if they help patients, that is really success. Unfortunately, none of the companies that we start is going to become the next Google or Facebook. A lot of times it takes many years, a lot of work, a long time in clinical trials to make a company succeed. And so we need to be very careful about the spending, very efficient. Every time you go to raise money, the investors want a big piece of the company. And if you do that too much, the company may succeed, but there's nothing left for the employees. So try to send everybody appropriately, but be very careful with the spending and keep the team as small as possible for as long as possible. As I mentioned, great leadership at the company is important. It doesn't need to be someone who has been already a CEO of 5 companies. We've had some of our greatest successes with people who we think have the potential to really lead great teams. There's a saying that one of my partners has that everyone hires in their own self-image. So since I've been in the medical device industry, working at the companies a long time, I'm maybe inclined to think that that is the best experience. But doctors look at this and say, well, doctors know the most about medicine, maybe they should run a company. And the truth is that any sort of background can be appropriate, but we need, again, someone who is bright, motivated, passionate, and able to lead, but also able to listen and build the team effectively. And really, even though we might come up with a great idea and form a company, that is really only 5 or 10% of the value. It is working through those 5 or 10 years to bring the product through development, clinical trials, approval, commercialization that adds most of the value to the present moment. So the Foundry is today, it's a very small group. There are just 5 of us. Myself and Mark Dean, both former engineers who have evolved into roles leading companies in the early stages. As an engineer, I can say that engineers aren't necessarily usually the best leaders for companies, but sometimes. But we end up handing off to people who are better at leading the companies as they grow. Jeff Granger has a background in patent attorney, and handles the intellectual property of companies, which is a really big focus for us. It's really important that once you've developed a product and are selling it, that you have patents so that you can protect and prevent everybody from copying your idea. Barrett handles all of the business aspects, finance, all of the bookkeeping, administration, hiring, facilities, all of the other work. And John is our newest partner. Speaking Russian, is a very, very talented engineer, and he has been leading the team in the development efforts of our latest project, which is a very complex project. And it's been really impressive to see how he has brought forth everyone's skills to make this company very much headed on the path to success. So our group really includes our venture capital partners. We're talking with them every day, every week about the device project, progress, and getting their feedback, and that's important. It is a small community, and so we're always talking to our partners and other companies, working together because we typically have very similar problems that we're trying to overcome. In the past, I think there was a tendency towards secrecy to protect and not tell other people what we're doing. And over time, at least in America, that has changed to more of an attitude of being open, of trying to educate people more early about what the company is doing, and to share our challenges so that hopefully we can get solutions. We also maintain relationships with the big medical device companies, which are global, Johnson, Davidian, etc., which are really, first of all, key to acquiring our companies once they have become successful, but also as investors. So we've worked on a lot of things. Companies have hired a lot of employees and created a fair amount of value over the years. And we've evolved to a very particular model, which may or may not make sense in your setting. Really, there are endless models that can work. I think the important things are to focus on aligning incentives so that everyone's working together, and to be fair. So if someone is bringing great value, let's give them more of the company so that at the end of the day, everyone is fairly treated. That's the only principle that makes sense. Our particular model is that we form the Foundry itself is an LLC, as I said, with 5 employees. And what we do is, at the start of the process, form a new company, which we incorporate as a United States company. And then we buy some stock in that company, and the investors invest some money, typically $5 million, as the initial fund of the company. Then we have an agreement between the Foundry and the new company, where they agree to pay our salaries and costs of running the company, and we agree to put all of our efforts in helping to build that company. As I said, over the next several years, we do look at lots of ideas, and do a lot of actual work to figure out if those are good ideas. We make prototypes, do testing in cadaver tissue and animals. We work very hard to get into first clinical trials with the product prior to the next round of financing, build up our patent portfolio around this, and after that time, we select one of those projects as the focus of the new company. We raise more money for the company. Over time, we recruit a new CEO and leadership. We remain involved as advisors, as board members, and so on, but gradually turn our focus to looking at the next company. So it's sort of a unique model, but it has worked for us. The key thing to make this work and to make any structure work is to build trust and relationships with investors and other partners. It's not about getting the very best deal, the very last dollar or ruble out of the company. It is about making sure that everyone succeeds and feels that they can trust you, so you can do this again next year. So, how do we pick projects? As I said, we're looking for big ideas, and we really work to identify the very best ideas through intensive research. Lots of brainstorming, and as we focus on an area, we go out and talk to the very best surgeons and doctors around the world, wherever they are. I have to mention, when I was at Hartford working on less invasive heart surgery, our biggest, most challenging project was to develop a surgical anastomosis device to attach the blood vessels together for bypass surgery without the need to suture them together. And I don't know if you're familiar, but actually Russia is the real inventor, innovator of surgical stapling devices. US Surgical actually got its technology from Russia. Their company for surgical stapling, which is where their business. So it was a Professor Vasily Ivanovich Kolosov in St. Petersburg, who actually did the very first successful internal linear bypass in 1968 in St. Petersburg, and he developed a surgical stapling device for this treatment. He's been working with Dr. Indigo, who's from Moscow. And I tracked down his son, Evgeny Kolosov, who was in Knuckle doing cardiac surgery there, and met him in Paris and tried to engage him in a partnership because he had actually continued to develop a stapling device. And unfortunately, this was in the mid-90s, and it was a very difficult time for Dr. Kolosov, and he really wasn't able to develop a partnership. But that is the sort of thing that we do, going wherever to track down the people who have the very best ideas. And then we work to improve those ideas through iterative invention, prototyping, preclinical testing. Over the past year, John has led a group every week. We do either an animal study or a study, this is a cardiology project, using hearts, cadaver hearts and hearts and things, to test our latest devices, see how they're working, see how we can improve them, and then sit down at the chalkboard and try to improve them, and then next week make even better devices. And over the course of the past year, there's been a remarkable process of invention that has led us to think some very interesting ideas. And to do that, we really need to create the right atmosphere for brainstorming to succeed. In my experience, the best thing is to get a group of approximately 5 or 6 people. It can be more, it can be less. And have them have dramatically different points of view. Maybe a physician, an engineer, an attorney, a nurse, other people from the company. And really it is those different viewpoints coming together and focusing on a problem in an atmosphere where everybody is listened to, everybody's ideas are heard, and at the same time, everybody trusts and respects each other cares enough for each other that we can also be critical of those ideas. So, my partner politely says, well, Hemson, you're an idiot. That idea won't work because of this. Here's a better idea. They say, well, politely, no, you're an idiot. My idea is better because we can improve on that. And back and forth between us, in the course of a very short time, a lot of ideas can come along. We have an assembler, a woman who puts together our devices, who's from Cambodia, and her English is, I'm sure, worse than any of your English. And she is in these meetings too, because she actually has her hands on the device every day and says, no guys, you're both idiots. I tell you, here's what's right. This really is an important aspect to create this atmosphere that allows people, because it's a little scary to share your ideas and be told how you should. It's important. And we keep doing that until we get an idea where we say, this is really a good idea, which really will break through. It's very hard to bring a new product to market. It's hard to get doctors and hospitals to change what they do unless you offer them the chance to really have a better procedure. So the patients can, after heart surgery, without cutting their chest open, they can get out of bed and go home in 3 days instead of 7 or 8 days. And they really like this. On the other hand, that technology was less successful because it was very hard on the surgeon. And we really need to make a project better for the physician as well as the doctor, because either one can say, no, I don't want this, I want to do this. So often as we look at an area, we say, you know what, to make a device really successful, here are the sort of goals it has to meet. It has to be completely without a surgery. It has to be a certain type of goal has to be met. And unless we meet that, it really doesn't make sense to start a company. And okay, we keep thinking about it. There are projects we'll come back to it over the years, many times. There's one project treating emphysema in the lungs. And there was a surgical procedure, lung volume reduction surgery, where they cut open the chest and cut out the sickest parts of the lung. And in patients who have bad emphysema, they say, I don't care if you kill me or fix me, but do one or the other, don't leave me like this. But it really does kill 10% of the patients. And we were thinking about this and thinking about this, and how can we improve this so that it doesn't have such high mortality? And finally said, you know what, it has to be not a surgery at all. And so we developed the idea eventually, after 3 years of thinking about this, to put in little one-way valves that are passed through the bronchial passages to let the air out of those diseased areas and not back in, so that over the course of days and weeks, those areas of the lung collapse. And if they're collapsed, that's almost as good as taking them out. There's plenty of room in the chest now for the rest of the lungs to function well. In that company, we went out and did a major randomized clinical trial in the US and Europe. It proved statistically that it really did improve lung function. And then our US FDA still said, well, it's improved, but it's not improved enough. So we're selling this product in Europe and in the US. So this process, as I said, takes a long time, and we want to move as quickly as possible, but it can only move so quickly. In the initial prototyping and animal testing process, we want to iterate until the device is as good as possible, and then get to initial human studies as quickly as possible. We learn a lot from the animal study process, but you really start to learn for real when you get into patients. Everything ends up being a little different. The patients react different to physiology, no matter what you think is very different. And you need to go wherever you can to get into humans as quickly as possible, as long as it obviously is ethically appropriate and with following all the guidelines from the oppublicated and so on. So two of our companies actually are doing the very first human studies in Riga, Latvia, which is much closer to you here than us in San Francisco, but still we found there the right doctor and the right hospital to let us get the human experience quickly, seeing good results, the patients are benefiting, and we are learning more quickly. After that first in-man experience, then you need to get enough feedback to make sure that the product is really working and you really understand the likely complications. And virtually any device now needs to undergo a very formal, randomized, if possible blinded, placebo-controlled clinical trial to prove that it is very successful, really, it's not a placebo effect, and so on. So that these typically take several years to get approval, enroll the patients, treat the patients, wait for follow-up. Typically, we want to see if the patients are still seeing a benefit at least 1 year, and then apply for approval. And the approval process is different around the world, but it's very interesting that the U.S. FDA has become so difficult that most of the companies that we're starting now, we focus initially on getting a CE mark and actually building a business in Europe. Sometimes even before we start the U.S. trial. So there's no reason why we could not do that from here just as easily as we are doing that from California. You need not only approval to sell the device, you need someone to pay you for the device, and as the healthcare budgets of every country are under more and more pressure, that process can be a stumbling block. You pay for the product. And then after that, you can go out and sell the product and persuade the business physicians to use the product. So all of these hurdles explain why it takes 5 years, 7 years, 10 years to bring great new products to market. And there's all the more emphasis on keeping the spending very low in the first years so that you can do all of this in a cost-effective way. So what sorts of projects have we picked? A lot of things we've done have focused on eliminating surgery, taking things to open surgeries, making them minimally invasive, making them percutaneous or catheter-based, or completely non-invasive. Looking at things which make a dramatic change in the clinical course of existing procedures. One area we started to think about recently is taking drug markets and turning those into device procedures, which typically, if you just can take a pill, why would you want to have a surgery? But there are those opportunities where one surgery might eliminate 20 years of taking several drugs. And even if those drugs are generic, that benefit is high enough to justify the procedure. We've also looked at some things that are quote-unquote simpler, easier to market, such as some cosmetic projects. One focused on treating cellulite, one focused on treating, of all things, excessive sweating. People who sweat too much, and we developed a microwave system that eliminates the sweat glands and can also eliminate hair in underarms. And so this is actually potentially very interesting work. So I'll tell you about a few of the companies that we've started, just to get a flavor. eValve is a treatment for mitral valve regurgitation, and it follows from the ideas of an Italian surgeon, Natalia Alfieri, who was repairing a mitral valve and the repair wasn't working, and the surgery was taking too long. He was getting very nervous, and he had a thought to himself, And what he did was he put a suture right in the middle of the two leaflets of the mitral valve to hold them together. So rather than one open leaky valve, there were two smaller valves. So this is called a bow tie or a butterfly procedure also. And we heard about this and thought to ourselves, the cardiologist came to us and said, look at this. He said, great, we can probably do this with a catheter. So we made a very, very high-tech paper clip, clothespin, as we know, which we put on the mitral valve. We started this company in 1999, went through development in 2003, had the first successful clinical trial, went through a large randomized trial, and in 2009 the company was acquired by Concentric Medical. The original concept came appropriately from a French doctor. Ischemic stroke, as you all know, happens when a blood clot that is formed in the left atrium of the heart typically breaks loose, flows up into the brain, and blocks the artery in the brain. And the doctor was thinking this blockage is sort of like a cork in a wine bottle. So why don't we make a corkscrew and go with it, pull the clot out of the brain. And again, this was actually a very challenging thing to do. We put a catheter, a guide wire in from the leg, go up into the brain, and once the catheter is there, this guide wire turns into a corkscrew, grabs the clot and pulls it out. It took a very long process to do a clinical trial. Typically you need informed consent from the patient or the patient's next to their kin to do a treatment of the new device. And these patients are having a stroke. They can't talk, they can't tell you anything. And so that was one of the particular challenges of testing this device. Got approval, and we've been gradually improving this device, improving it over time. Now we're at the point where 90% of the time we're able to pull the clots out of the brain. And typically these patients having major strokes, they can't talk, they can't move one side of their body. Over half of them will die. And you go in and pull the clot out, and on the table, all of a sudden they can talk again. And they can move their hands again. So this is really like Lazarus, raised from the dead. Very, very gratifying to the physicians. This company was acquired last year by Stryker. Ardian is a very unusual company. It was invented by two inventors in New York, one of whom was actually an engineer from St. Petersburg. And they identified the fact that the renal nerves, the nerves to and from the kidney, played a key role in managing, they were focused on heart failure. And that if you block those nerves, you might be able to really have an impact on heart failure. So we took this project on, working in collaboration with them, and evolved it in several ways. First of all, rather than an implantable device to block those nerves, we developed a very simple catheter procedure. We put the catheter in, treat the patient in less than 30 minutes in a way that kills the nerves without hurting the blood vessels. And we also moved the focus from heart failure to hypertension. We think we can also address patients with heart failure, but hypertension is a much bigger opportunity with a very much simpler endpoint, which is blood pressure. We took patients who had a systolic blood pressure of approximately 175 millimeters of mercury on average, even though they were taking 3, 4, 5 drugs, beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, diuretics, etc. And treating them with this procedure over the next 3 months, we saw their blood pressure drop 30 points. And virtually everyone saw a positive effect. And actually, over the following 3-4 years, that benefit was even improved. So, really an exciting new opportunity to address a major disease that affects nearly 1/3 of adults around the world. And this company was acquired also last year by Medtronic. So having done this development and company formation at the Foundry for many years, we actually were approached by a retinal surgeon who knew, and he said, I want to do this same process focused just on ophthalmology, on vision. And so we formed a separate group with him, and one of our partners became the CEO, her name is Angela McFarlane, and she has my role at Foresight Labs. And they are doing some really amazing things. The first company, Transcend Medical, is treating glaucoma with a tiny shunt, which is placed through a small corneal puncture that's draining from the anterior chamber of the eye to the suprachoroidal space. It's really, genuinely a 5-minute procedure. And that is in a major clinical trial now around Europe and the US. The second company focused on drug delivery to the front of the eye from a small implant placed in the punctal plug, the tear duct. The next company is focused on refractive correction, and the next company is focused on also on drug delivery to the front of the eye and the back of the eye. It's really, again, done the same process, bringing together a retinal surgeon, a general ophthalmologist who has also been an entrepreneur who started companies in Israel, a genius of a PhD chemist who has done a lot of inventing over the years in the field of ophthalmology, and playing with ideas, looking at things, inventing and saying, how can we make this better, and then waiting until those ideas are really, truly great before a company. So I've told you about all the wonderful things that are happening, but a lot of those companies don't succeed. Despite having a great idea, building a great team, executing well, sometimes you do the trial and the benefit maybe isn't quite as strong as you thought. Not strong enough to justify going out and selling the product and so on. So a lot of this is just luck, but over the years we've become cautious about projects where you see a smaller benefit. You have something that might help by 10 or 15%, then is that enough to persuade doctors to change their ways? So that's one important thing, is the projects where you can know that it works early are much easier. And then also, one thing that we've learned to do is to talk more to the big companies. It takes them a long time to become familiar with the idea, and to understand it across their organization, and also to become familiar with you. At the end of the day, the relationship is important. Buying into a project, an idea, also a group of people, and the relationship is important. So that's a lot about the Foundry. So I've talked here for a long time. I hope some of this is useful. The difference for us is that rather than being an incubator, we are really serial entrepreneurs, starting one company after another. And the reason we succeed is that as a broader team, we've developed a great deal of trust, respect for the skills that each of us can bring, and try to be creative, we're able to be critical of each other, and that creates a learning organization that can really do great things. So, we're very patient with my talking. We're happy to answer any questions, and also ask questions of who John or get other perspectives.
Thank you, Hudson.
I think the results speak for themselves. When 5 people create over 200 patents and employ over 500 people, I think that's impressive. And I think the fundamental difference with Russia from Silicon Valley is the fact that you've mentioned that you have a network of venture capital firms that specifically invest in medical devices and biotech technologies. Also have a network of people that are potentially buyers and people that can sort of, be strategic partners to your startups. In Russia, we not only have a small amount of projects, but we also have like 3 funds that invest and almost no companies that can buy.
Yeah.
I think the biggest challenge right now for Russia is to change that situation.
It is a little different challenge. And my experience going to Germany to start a company at that point, they didn't have a lot of really innovative companies either. But they did have a base of companies that manufacture medical devices. And we have that also here. Companies that may be old historic companies, but make medical devices. We have a group of people who have experience, understand the issues of design, development, and manufacturing, selling sterile equipment, and then develop reputations with surgeons and so on. And building on those, I think, is important, to leverage those skills and to build those skills. I mentioned at this meeting I attended yesterday that if I were here and I were going to start a medical device company, one thing I would do is look at the products that the doctors are already using here that come from the West, but which aren't patented here in Russia. Because I tell you, most Western companies file patents in America, file patents in Europe, don't file patents in Russia or the former Soviet states. And so just creating a company that manufactures those same products and addresses that existing market and building a reputation as a very high quality manufacturer, bringing good products, learning the skill set, building that core of capability, and then using that as a springboard, as a resource to develop new products. Because I'm sure that your goal is to bring innovations that will change the whole world. And I applaud that, agree with that, but this might actually be the path to do that. Give the resources to them.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Yes. My name is Ruslia, and my question is: if someone have an idea how to make a new product, a new device, what is the process? How can he project his idea before it gets into the market and get better?
In the United States, there is a process called the provisional patent application process, which is very cheap. It's a few $100s to apply for a provisional patent. And so if you document your idea, apply for a provisional patent, that gives you protection while you go out and look for investors and so on, when you want to have people who are looking at the project sign a confidentiality agreement to make sure that they can't run off and steal your idea. But you have to go out and talk to somebody to make things happen. And then after a year, you have to pay a little more money to turn this into a full patent and apply for the global patent application. From here, you can do the same thing. You can also apply directly to the World Patent Organization for a patent, which isn't too expensive. It allows you to keep the cost low, actually for up to 30 months until you pay the fees to really pursue the patents in other areas, by which time you have more money on it. So documenting your idea, so it's really good service. And then go out and talk to investors. And other groups like us are open to hearing ideas from yourself, from anywhere. And maybe there are ideas that we this is really great, or if it's not something we're able to take on, maybe we can suggest others who could be helpful. So that's the process. To the extent that you can make a prototype, do any testing, find someone who can help you make a prototype. Obviously, you gain access to tissue or whatever it is investing in. That can help grow the case.
Any more questions?
Another question is if in healthcare we have some big clinical trials that will finish in 2020 or later, 2016, sorry. And do your company have some portfolio of projects that would be raised on the market if this trial will be successful? Or some process of this work?
Yeah, we actually, as I said, that's one of the challenges is you need to prove that the device works, and if it's going to take 10 years, then there's really no way to fund the business. Although I have seen people companies that form a company, develop the device, and then wait until a really high-paid company, fire all the employees, and then a few years later start it back up once it is proven correct. We also have an issue with hello? Okay. Anyway, so it's very hard to figure out how to make those things work, and sometimes also the patents will expire before you've proven that the device is successful. But that doesn't mean it isn't worth pursuing. If this is a change that could help patients, then that is actually what's most important. More important than a company or profits or whatever.
Hudson, I have a question too. Do you think it's the right thing to separate a research fellow from a PhD person? Do you think it's better to have two people that sort of have different responsibilities in the company, or is it better to combine qualities of entrepreneurial qualities and science person?
You know, I think it is important to have both of those viewpoints, and certainly there are those people who can cover both, doctors who can really understand and think clearly about the business aspects and vice versa. I was mentioning earlier that as medical students, you know how much you have to learn in such a short time, and you have to learn about every disease. And so you are told exactly what to do when you see a patient who has emphysema or whatever, how to diagnose, how to treat, and so on. And here's exactly what you do, and now we move on to the next disease. And so sometimes when I have a crazy idea, and we say, how about putting a little valve in the lung passage? We went out and asked 10 pulmonologists, and 9 of them said, this is a stupid idea, it won't work because the patients will have infections. Because you've blocked airflow, and behind that valve there's going to be a terrible infection, pneumonia, and who knows what. And so we thought, well, maybe so, and actually went and looked in the literature and found a whole series of papers from various periods where people had inhaled a peanut or something else that blocked lung passages for 20 years, and it wasn't a problem. And there was an infection. So we said, well, maybe not. And in the first 500 patients we treated, we had 1 case of pneumonia, which was treated with a course of antibiotics. So it turned out not to be a problem, but the pulmonologist thought it would. So most of the time, the doctors do know better about even crazy new ideas, but but there is some uncertainty. There is some chance that they're wrong. I know I'm wrong a lot of the time, but that doesn't stop me from continuing to throw out stupid ideas.
As a doctor, representing physician here, I have to tell you that doctors have a very rigid mentality most of the time. A lot of times, I would say. So therefore, yes, you can try. You should try, but then, as you mentioned, it's like, oh, it's not going to work because that's what we had. But then a little bit more the diligence, and you can make it happen.
And there are important reasons for physicians to be definitive and clear and rigid for the good of the patient.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm
So-
one of those rigid rigid physicians. So I think I'm one of those rigid physicians myself, and that's why a lot of times I provide the feedback whether it's the idea is actually great, or it makes a perfect business sense, but would it be applicable in the clinical practice? And then I also have a question. Since we used so much word of the reimbursement, and the Russian medical system is completely different, do you guys know what the reimbursement is? What we're talking about? Yeah, because that was my suspicion, because I thought that this is like a fundamental difference, because in the US we do have the, it's like basically the whole medical system is built on insurance, and doctors get paid by insurance companies. So basically it's not, you get paid for whatever you do, whatever you did. So for example, if the insurance company doesn't pay for the device, or for the procedure, then the doctor will not get paid. And it's very different here, so it's more straightforward. So basically, considering reimbursement, you have to think not only about whether it will improve patients' life, I mean, definitely the cost and everything is important, but whether the insurance will pay for this device, whether it's really so effective that insurance will benefit from long term, so they would, pay for it. So I think that's
It wasn't stages of development of product.
right. It's actually it's one of the very, very big parts if you're thinking about the American market, because that's a big part of our life. And that was the reason when we're talking about certain cosmetic products or something like this, like selfie, because in Russia it's also, I think it's like the medicine still is mostly free, right?
Yeah.
It's funded by, and there are some private, sector, the private practices, but they don't have to deal with, Blue Cross Blue Shield or anything like this.
But you also have cosmetic surgeons.
Exactly, and that was the reason about when we're talking about the cosmetic surgeries or something would improve quality of life. That's something which does not need to be, you don't have to deal with insurance for those procedures because the insurance will never pay for it anyway.
The American healthcare system has been in a huge crisis for the past 10 years and will be for the next 10 years as we struggle to figure out how to cover those patients who don't have insurance. And frankly, those patients can go to any clinic and get treated for free, and the clinic has to treat them, but it's a little awkward. So I think we will migrate towards a system where everyone is covered with a basic medical service, and if you want any really expensive procedures, especially late in life, you will need to pay for them. But it will take at least 10 years until we have anything as sensible as this.
So basically it will transform the Russian system.
Eventually we can learn.
Right.
Yes?
I would like to tell you about our small project.
Uh-huh.
It is project we proposed as a new method of training surgical skills. This idea is to use digital model of human body in virtual reality to simulate operations, and with using Kinect, computer system for detecting movements of a surgeon, of a doctor. So don't you know about similar projects in Europe or in US?
There are several of those. It's a very interesting area, I think really helpful to physicians and essential as we develop ever more complex devices. We actually worked with a fellow, Max, Max Goldschmidt, who is from Argentina, who developed this for eValve. So steering this little clothespin to the mitral valve and making sure it's in just the right place and modeling that, it takes some practice, and he developed a whole system where the physician can move the catheter and the rest is in a black box, and those movements are translated into a computer picture which looks like the angiogram. Exactly. So, so definitely a great idea, great opportunity. You know, fantastic computer programming skills here, which you can leverage to develop systems like that. So it's a good idea.
Maybe you will be interested in overall project.
Yeah, I think one of the areas that we would think hard about is the market for this. How are you going to get paid for this technology, and are you going to sell this to companies, which then have you develop a special model for their product? Other groups have thought about whether you created more of an entire body model that would allow you to test lots of different things on the same model. So definitely, it's worth pursuing. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
I have a question. My name is Alexei. Okay, you talk about primarily about surgeon and surgery devices, and are there any perspectives of creation of company which create tests or diagnostic methods, for example, for sequestration of DNA and others, which will be successful and good specialized on these methods, but not because these methods are cheap, but they are not material.
Right, right. No, this is a huge opportunity, and the value is very high. Even though, as you say, it's a test and there's no device and product, there's a lot of value. One of the best examples of that is a company, Genomic Health. Are you familiar with that? So you know, there's an epidemic of breast cancer in America, and there's a drug which treats, let's say, half of those patients very successfully, but only half. And so they used to give this drug to every woman who had breast cancer. That costs a lot of money and also a lot of side effects. Genomic Health developed a test to determine which patients had this Herceptin HER2 receptor, which showed that they would respond to the drug, and then give it only to the half of the patients. But I think the interesting thing there is that Genomic Health charges, I think, $3,000 for the test. So they captured a lot of that money that would otherwise be wasted treating the other patients. And so there are actually a lot of diagnostic companies, whether it's DNA testing or other types of diagnostic testing, that are becoming very successful companies. Probably more successes there in terms of number of companies started than in more traditional medical devices. And it really is better to just treat those patients who you're really going to help. Any other questions? Yeah, sure.
Does a company have any projects in robotic surgery or some robotic procedures that will grow in the future?
You know, that's an area we have never pursued. Actually, when I was working at Hartport, a friend of mine, Fred Mall, said, "Oh, come over, see what we're doing." He was developing intuitive surgical, the Da Vinci robot system. And I said, "Wow, this is really cool, this is really fun, but does it really help make the surgery any better? I don't know." Plus,
Hartport's devices were already very expensive, and if we added this, it would be even twice as expensive. And so I'm saying this as a way of saying that I was very wrong, thinking that that wasn't necessarily a good idea. Intuitive Surgical, as you know, is now a $20 billion company, and very successful. And I think there is clearly an opportunity for more projects in that field. If you can get in and do complex surgeries without cutting the patient open, because you have the ability to put your hands down at the end of the instruments, really, it's really neat. Plus, sometimes the doctors have fun, and that's important too. Yeah.
Another question about neuromodulation and these technologies, for example, deep brain stimulation. I know that the company Medtronic is very specialized in this field, but are there any this field is wide, so are the concepts in this field
Yeah, he's Russian, that's all fine.
Они оправдывают себя, они являются перспективными. Are they perspective?
Can it justify itself? Are they effective in your view?
The neuromodulation devices we're talking about.
Yes.
Well, absolutely. You know, the main business right now is for treating Parkinson's and other tremors and so on. There are 20 or 30 companies trying to modulate the nerves for other purposes. And Ardian, which I mentioned, is really neuromodulation in which we just turn the nerves off. And that's good because we don't have to keep an implantable device all the time and so on. But there are others where you want to stimulate. I think it's it's a very interesting area. I think that there will be some other big successes in this area, but it is teaching us also how little we know about how the body works. Several companies have been started to treat obesity using neuromodulation, to send a signal to the stomach saying, you're not hungry, don't eat, or to block the signal from the stomach to the brain saying you are hungry. And so far, those technologies haven't worked. Turns out there are about 50 things between nerves and hormones and other things telling us eat, 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 you know, eat or else you might starve tomorrow. But, and you block one or two of those and the other 47 or 48 are still working. But there are interesting opportunities.
Is the operation of this technology is expensive, much expensive than the other sites of surgery?
You know, it's important, but I think that if it addresses a really serious problem, at least in America and Europe, the money will be there. At the end of the day, both the FDA and the government that is paying for health care is more concerned that the device really works, that it doesn't cause harm to the patient, and that it has a real benefit, and less about the price. I think in the next 10 years they'll get more concerned about the price, but still, you know, there are some very interesting ideas. One company I'm aware of is looking at inflammation, like inflammatory bowel disease, where people really can't eat, their stomach is upset all the time, and other things, to a really clinically significant problem. And by modulating the parasympathetic nerves, maybe you can relax this. So it's very interesting. One of the things about this is that intrigues me is the connection to Eastern medicine. So acupuncture and so on. Is that neuromodulation? There are some funny connections there.
I think because when we're talking about the obesity and eating, if we're stressed, if you're depressed, and if we're not addressing this works much more.
Yeah.
And, you know, connecting East and West, if you think about meditation and all these meditative techniques, basically what gets activated, guys?
Yeah.
Please, what gets activated? Right nerve.
Yeah.
So it's the, you know, induces relaxation.
Yeah.
And you can think about something spiritual, you can think about regardless of religion, but the reality is actually physiology.
Yeah. The
In Chinese medicine, if you're talking about the qi, which goes and you have to basically channel all this energy through these certain things, it's actually exactly the vagus nerve.
Yeah, it's just the autonomic
So
nervous
it's
system. Yeah,
that's
it's
how we call it. You
yeah.
know? Sometimes we call it, you know, in Latin, and it just, you know,
Yeah.
so it's called differently.
Yeah, so there's a lot to be learned there, and I think in 10 years we could have some very successful devices that are implantable stimulators for neuromodulation. I think 10 years after that we will have eliminated those devices because we have an even simpler way to address that problem. And maybe it's just meditating, but maybe there's also a more
No, absolutely.
medical
But
treatment.
If we can you know, provide positive reinforcement for that, then we can measure it.
Yeah.
Because that's, I think that's a big part of it. It has to be measurable.
Yeah.
Yes. Measurable as a quality of life, or measurable in the amount of pounds lost, or kilograms, but it should be absolutely.
Yeah.
So guys, how many of you are planning to have a startup in medical? Кто планирует открыть свой бизнес?
Или начать какие-нибудь
Yay.
компании.
Все планируют.
Well, go for it. Go for it.
Come up with the good ideas, do the due diligence, see what's back there.
Well, I'd like to add how important it is as an engineer to have close working relationships with physicians. And as engineers, we can come up with new ideas, we can prototype these new ideas, we can do engineering tests, but it's only when we put these ideas, these prototypes, into the physician's hands and see how he uses it, see what she's thinking, hear what she's thinking as she's using the device. That's the only time when we get to close that circle and understand how well things are working.
Yeah. Yeah, even though we have all this fun, I am still, every time we go and see a treatment, incredibly full of respect for the doctors who have a patient who comes into the office and says, I don't feel well, and trying to figure out what that is and how to treat it, and being the one to actually make that treatment. It's only one patient at a time, whereas if we create a successful device that treats thousands of people, but nothing happens without that one patient, one doctor relationship. And so both are incredibly valuable. One can't happen without the other.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.